hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Cross Examination. Today I have a very special guest. Raymond Benson has joined us. And Raymond, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your books?
Well, thank you for having me as your guest. It's very nice to be here. I am Raymond Benson, and I am an author. A little over 40 books out there in the ether. And I'm also a film historian, a film lecturer, and instructor. I had many years as a musician and still do that. There was a time I was a computer game designer and a theater stage director. So I've been my career's been the long and winding road.
Yeah, very, very long and storied. Yeah, very cool. And you have several series out now, and we'll talk about those in just a second. But one thing I wanted to mention that is kind of a big thing that you did was take over for Ian after Ian Fleming died, take over the mantle as the James Bond writer. And can you tell us a little bit about how that happened? And
I was actually the first American to be commissioned by the Ian Fleming estate to write new official James Bond novels. After his death in 1964, his estate decided they would periodically hire new writers to continue the series, mainly, I think, to keep the character in copyright. So, the first guy was Kingsley Amis, who wrote one book in the late 60s. Then it was several years in the 80s, John Gardner was the next writer to do new adventures. And he was at the mantle for a long time, for almost 15 years or so. And then when he announced his retirement, they asked me to do it. And I'm sure you're wondering why me. So that's it's kind of a long story, but I grew up with Bond. I saw Goldfinger on the big screen when it was first released, and I was 9 years old at the time. Just a few months after that, they re-released Dr. No and From Russia with Love as a double bill. So I saw the first three movies within about 6 months of each other at a very impressionable age. And then I started reading the books, because they were everywhere, the Signet paperbacks. And so I was a big fan, like most boys my age in the 60s, when that was the Star Wars of the time,
Mm-hmm.
And but I grew up, I became a normal person. I went to college, got a degree, and moved to New York and became a theater director. But it was in the early 80s that I got the idea to write a book. And I wasn't even planning on being a writer, but something had, my interest had been piqued again in Bond. I think it was the first John Gardner book that came out, and the movie For Your Eyes Only, which kind of brought Bond back to earth after several, rather silly episodes. And I kind of got excited again. I started rereading the books, and at one point, some friends of mine and I were talking, and the question came up: "What if you had to write a book? What would you write?" And I thought about it, and I just I'd kind of like to write like an encyclopedia about the history of James Bond, because at the time there was nothing like that.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, there had been a couple of biographies of Ian Fleming that were out of print. There were a couple of books on just the movies. There was, a couple of books from the 60s that were out of print that were about the novels. I wanted something that had everything: a biography of Ian Fleming, analyses and critiques of all the novels and all the movies, and a history of the whole franchise, of how it, started and how it evolved.
Yeah.
So my friends thought, "Oh man, you should do that." I started thinking about it, and at the time, I'm living in New York City, and I have a day job, but I'm still doing theater, and I thought, well, what the heck, this might be fun. And so I investigated how to do it, and a friend of mine had published a joke book, and I asked him, "How did you get that done?" And he introduced me to his editor at his publisher, and she said she's the one that told me you need to do a proposal. And a nonfiction book proposal. So she kind of gave me the what I needed to put in it. So I did that and turned it into her, and I got a contract overnight to write this book. And I got an advance and everything. It was like, holy shit! Now I guess I got to write it. And it took 3 years. It took me
And
3
so
years.
did you do all of the you mentioned about the kind of critiques of the different movies and
Yes,
books and stuff?
yes,
You did
yeah.
all that yourself, or you got
I
other
did it all.
people to?
No, it was all me.
See, I probably would have taken the shortcut of like
No,
asking other people to write some of those.
no, I did it all. In fact, I went to England and did the research. I met members of Ian Fleming's family and his friends and colleagues, and
Wow.
really, I went to Indiana University at the Lilly Library where they have all of his manuscripts and stuff, and studied all that. And back then, a lot of his friends and colleagues were still alive, and so I got to meet many of them, as well as his family. So then when the book came out in 1984, it was called The James Bond Bedside Companion. And that kind of established me as this sort of Bond expert. And I got involved with fan clubs and started, writing for their magazines. And I stayed the Fleming estate really liked the book. And so we stayed in touch, and I did little odd jobs for them, no pun intended, throughout the rest of the 80s and early 90s. And then, during this time, during the late 80s and early 90s, I was in the computer game industry writing and designing adventure games. So I was writing fiction. It was just interactive fiction. So I was creating characters and dialogue and plots. And
so they were like the old kind of text-based adventure
well, I
games?
started off doing the text-based, kind of like the old Infocom Zork games.
Yeah.
I did my first 3 games were text adventures, and 2 of those were James Bond games. So I was already, and I also wrote adventure module for the James Bond role-playing game, the pencil and paper role-playing game from the 80s.
Oh, wow.
And anyway, so I was, that was how I was honing my fiction writing skills. So in 1995, late 1995, John Gardner told the estate, the company was called Glidrose. Now it's called Ian Fleming Publications. Anyway, he told them, I'm done this for a long time. I want to retire. So they called me. They just called me out of the blue and said, are you interested? Because I guess they thought I knew the universe well enough. Mm-hmm. And, I was very heavily into this stuff. And, I'd never written a novel before, but, actually I had written a novel, and the chairman of Ian Fleming Publications had read it and, thought it was okay, but, it was the kind of first novel you put in a drawer and it stays there forever. But he knew that I could at least start a project and finish it, and he knew that I wrote this other kind of fiction. So I got the job, and for 7 years I was the official author, and I wrote 6 original Bond novels and they came out between 1997 and 2002. But also wrote 3 movie novelizations during the Pierce Brosnan era. His movies were not based on any books; they were original screenplays. At the time, they wanted tie-in novels, so I would get the screenplay and turn it into a novel. So 9 books and 3 short stories, which were published in Playboy and TV Guide and some other place. So for 7 years, it was a roller coaster. I was traveling the world. I would go to all my locations that I was writing about and walk in Bond's footsteps and stay in his hotels and eat his food. And I wouldn't jump out of an airplane without a parachute or anything like that. And, and the women I'd stay away from. But at least, all the places that I wrote about, I went to.
So what was the craziest experience you had while you were researching?
Oh, wow. There were quite a few, actually, but one really interesting one, I was in Japan for the 6th book, The Man with the Red Tattoo. And in the story, Bond is on the passenger rail train that goes from the main island of Japan up to the northern island, Hokkaido. And the passenger rail train goes underwater, under the sea, for about a mile underwater and goes to the other island. And that's called the Seikan Tunnel. It's the longest underwater passenger rail tunnel in the world. Well, anyway, I had this great idea of, the bad guy's on the train with him, and the bad guy stops the train and jumps off, and Bond has to chase him down in there in the tunnels and stuff. So I asked J.R. Rail, can I get down there to sort of map out my chase and describe it accurately? And it's off limits. It's totally, nobody can go down there unless you're really authorized to go down there. But the name James Bond opens a lot of doors. And so my guide and I went down with this huge entourage of J.R. Rail people, and they took me down there, and I mapped out my chase and everything. But the clincher is that my guide and I wanted to go to Hokkaido. We were on our way there. So they arranged for the train to stop in the middle of the ocean and pick us up. And it's not supposed to do that, and so you can just imagine the train stopping, and all these Japanese passengers are on it, and they're going, oh, what are we doing stopping in the middle of the ocean? And these doors open, and these two white guys come on, and they're going, who are they?
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. But also there's this one island in Japan called Naoshima in the Inland Sea, and I said a lot of the story there. And that the government of that island was so pleased and proud to be in a Bond novel that they erected a museum dedicated to my book on the island. And it was the kind of, it's the kind of museum that's, the gigantic ball of string, come see it, that kind of museum.
Right.
But I thought, okay, it's going to, it'll be there for a year. It was there for 11 years before it closed. So apparently there were people that went to see it. They had artwork that illustrated the story of the book, and, they had a whole display about me. And so I had my own museum in Japan for 11 years.
Wow, that is amazing.
I know. That was probably the biggest perk of doing. I mean, the Bond years were a roller coaster, and I was really busy, and it was I met a lot of really incredible, cool people, celebrities, and I visited the movie sets, and but traveling the world, I went places I never thought I'd go to in my life.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and like you say, Bond is such an icon that
Yeah.
has transcended so many different generations and been such a cool character.
Yeah.
So many.
Well, that's the era of my career that will be the footnote in history about me. So.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty cool to have a footnote. And who knows what else is to come yet? Because you also have a lot of other series that.
Yeah. Well, see, the Bond books were my first novels. So, my very first novel published was a James Bond novel, seen all over the world and translated into a dozen languages. And so, you don't get much. My entry into publishing was totally unorthodox. I'm totally grateful to the Ian Fleming estate and his family and everything for trusting me to do that, because that's more than a foot in the door. That's like, being thrown to the wolves. But it got me started, and I had 9 books, right off the bat in 7 years. So
what was it like? I can't imagine, as a writer, I can't imagine the pressure that it would be after you've done these James Bond books. Now you've retired from them, and you're going to do other books of your own, and you can tell your own stories. And now it's like, okay, first of all, what story do I tell? And then there's the pressure of,
Well, that was the thing. I had to reinvent myself, because I didn't want to do Bond-like spy novels. Everybody would just say, oh, he's just capitalizing on his Bond work, and it's not Bond, so who cares? I wanted to do something different. I wanted to do more psychological suspense, more Hitchcockian kind of stuff, stuff that I read, and that's what I did. I started writing my own stuff, but I was also getting jobs as a tie-in writer, which is a good bread and butter work, tie-in novelizations. So, like, for example, Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell. That's a very popular video game. In the year 2004, that game was really, really popular, and his publishers decided to make books based on the video game. So I got hired to write the first two. There was a popular video game called Metal Gear Solid, still is, the whole series. I was hired to write 2 books based on that game. So I've done a lot of these what they call tie-in books, novelizations. So that's kept me, going as well. In between my original books, which have been, published since the year 2002, since I left Bond, and I've been doing that recently too.
So can you tell us? Okay, you've got a book coming out in September. That is your next one out. That is called Hotel Destiny, a ghost noir.
Yep.
And then you've got one that just came out. Can you tell us about the recent one?
My last 3 books were published by Skyhorse, and I like to call them my social problem thrillers, because each one dealt with some kind of social problem that's sort of plaguing us. Like The Secrets on Chicory Lane came out in 2017. That's about mental illness and child abuse, but it's a thriller. In the Hush of the Night came out a year later in 2018. That one is about human trafficking. It's an FBI procedural. It takes place in Chicago. And my most recent one is Blues in the Dark. Came out last fall in 2019. And it's about racism and sexism in Hollywood.
Oh, wow.
And I actually, I wrote the book in 2017 before Me Too happened. So I was like on the cusp of that when I was writing it. The Harvey Weinstein thing didn't even happen until after I'd finished the first draft. And I was dealing with all that kind of stuff in the book. But it didn't come out until 2019. It's too bad it didn't come out right then.
Right. But have you seen an increase from that, like a surge since the whole Me Too and
not really. No. It's a tough market. Let's just put it that way. I mean, it's gotten great reviews and response from the people who have read it. But my next book is totally different. It's called Hotel Destiny, a ghost noir. It's a ghost story. But it's also a mystery. It's about a ghost who's trying to solve his own murder.
Oh, okay. So is that contemporary setting, or it's?
It takes place in the 80s in New York. Okay. I lived in New York then, so it was. It takes place at a hotel in Times Square, so it's all still real sleazy and all the bad stuff that you used to associate with Times Square is part of the milieu of the scene. So, but it also, there's some time
now, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's very different.
A little different in New York now. Well, now with the pandemic, it's completely different. But before all that, it's amazing how they cleaned up those some of those areas.
Right. Well, Hotel Destiny comes out in September. And I'm looking at, see what it does. Something different for me.
And you've also got a series that you did called the Black Stiletto.
Oh yeah, that's I consider there's 5 books in that, but there's also an ebook that collects all 5 books into one, and that's called the Complete Saga. The Black Stiletto I consider my magnum opus. I think it's really kind of the best thing I've ever did. And it's probably been my most successful of all my original books, my non-Bond books. That's the Black Stiletto series. They've done very well, and they've been optioned by Hollywood. Still in development, but there was a moment in time when ABC almost did it as a TV show. They developed it for about a year and wrote a script, and had. It was going full blast, but then just one of those Hollywood things, it just kind of fell apart and it didn't happen. But the original producer still has the option, and he's still working, trying to get it done.
Yeah. And that was, you had said Mila Kunis was involved?
Mila Kunis was involved. She was going to be executive producer. Yeah. But just didn't happen. But the Black Stiletto is it's about a woman who in the late 1950s who goes to New York, puts on a mask, and calls herself the Black Stiletto, and she fights for social justice, and is kind of like a Batman type character, no superhero abilities or anything, just a vigilante. And she's active for 5 years and disappears. Then we cut to the present day. There's a grown man in the Chicago suburbs taking care of his mother who has Alzheimer's in a nursing home. And he discovers that she was the Black Stiletto. So it's a story that goes back and forth in time. It tells her story in the past and their story in the present. And it's really one big story over 5 books. It's a serial, really. So, yeah, I'm really proud of that work.
So is it, to give us an idea of what, there's a lot of comic book characters out there and superhero type characters, and here's a character, like you say, is a more of a vigilante. Like what?
Right.
How would you describe it in the lens of like what our typical superhero type thing? Because I mean, obviously, you said no superpowers or anything like that.
Right.
But even then, you get Batman, and you get that sort of
high-tech stuff.
Yeah, you get high-tech stuff. You get that kind of cartoon.
No, she's just. I mean, when she's the Black Stiletto, it's 1958, 59, 60, 61, and 61 and 62. So she just puts on a costume and goes out, and she's really good with martial arts. She actually took martial arts lessons and learned how to fight, and she's real good with swinging on a rope and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And she's really good with a knife. She has a stiletto. So, yeah, she battles crooks and spies and all that. So there is a comic book kind of sensibility to it, but it's more serious because it has the whole Alzheimer's thing, which plays very heavily into the story. And it is a realistic look at a costume vigilante character.
Yeah, very cool.
What it would really have been like, for a woman to do this.
Yeah, well, and hopefully we'll get to see it, translated into onto the big screen or a television series. I mean, that would obviously lend itself well to a limited series. An HBO type limited series would be excellent.
You'd think, yeah.
You would think, he says.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's crazy.
No, it's kind of made for that. But the first one came out almost 10 years ago. 2011 was when the first book came out, and each successive book came out every year. But it's still available. All 5 books are still available, and for ebook readers, the complete saga, the Black Stiletto, the complete saga, has all 5 books for a nice price. So check it out.
Yeah, definitely. And that, of course, available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble as well.
Yep.
And also something I want to mention that you've got going on regularly. You've got Dan and Raymond's Movie Club.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and where people can find it?
You bet. I'm also a film historian. I was a film instructor at a college for many years, and have lectured on film for a long, long time. And I write about film for a magazine called Cinema Retro, and I review new Blu-ray releases and things like that. But about 13 years ago, I teamed up with the Chicago film critic Dan Geyer of the Daily Herald, and he and I formed Dan and Raymond's Movie Club, which was basically, it's kind of like a Siskel and Ebert act, only we do it live in front of an audience. We're sponsored by local area libraries who have us, and we do performances every month for different libraries. And our performances are 2 hours in length usually, and we pick a topic, like say the greatest war films, and we pick 15 of our favorite and best war films, and we show clips from the movies and talk about it and tell jokes. And we've developed a big following, and we're still at it. We start our 14th season in the fall.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice little side income, and we have a lot of fun doing it. But since the pandemic started, we've been doing it on Zoom, so anybody can join us now. And if you they're on Facebook, we have our own page, Dan and Raymond's Movie Club, and you can see what our schedule is each month there. Or on my website, raymondbenson.com, I have an appearances page, and there I have a section for Dan and Raymond's Movie Club, and you can see what we've got coming up over the next month.
And so, like, what are you mainly talking about? You know, you write for Cinema Retro. Are you mainly talking about older films? Or you're talking about new films, older
Not
films?
necessarily.
Everything.
It's all over the gamut. In fact, every year we have an Oscar show, and it's our most popular show, where we talk about the nominations for the Oscars that year. We show clips from the nominated movies, and we do our predictions of who's going to win and things like that.
Sure.
And that one, we get, you know, tons of people, you know, standing room only. So yeah, we like, for example, in July coming up, we have 2 shows. One is the greatest male sex symbols in the movies. Last month we did females, so we're ranking them 15 down to number 1, who we think the most influential male sex symbols are. We did females last month, and then we're also doing a show on our favorite animated movies. In August, I know we're doing a retrospective on Stanley Kubrick. So yeah,
Very cool. Very
yeah,
cool.
we've done all kinds of topics. You know, heist movies, the greatest chases, you know, the best fight scenes, you know, things like that. You know, who are the best villains of all time? You know.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
And people can find this on Facebook is kind of the place.
Facebook, we have our own page, Dan and Raymond's Movie Club, and also my website, raymondbenson.com, on the appearances page.
Okay, yeah, great.
Yeah.
And you're also, if people follow you on Facebook, not only are you a great author, you're also an accomplished pianist, and we get to see you jamming out pretty much daily, right? I mean,
yeah, ever since, you know, I've been a piano player for a long time. I've a professional one too, because I've played in, you know, restaurants and bars and all kinds of places. I had a gig at O'Hare Airport for about 2 years, and yeah, and I have a very wide, eclectic repertoire. But since the pandemic started, I don't know, I just started uploading just me playing the piano in my living room, a song a day. Well, not always every day, but, you know, at least, you know, I say daily, but it's more therapy for me. But people seem to like it because I'm getting a lot of comments and response. So, and, you know, it's all over the map. I have like a James Bond suite, and I do classical gas, and I do progressive rock like Jethro Tull and Yes, and I do, you know, David Bowie and all, you know, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, you can find that on my personal page, but you can find it on YouTube. I have my own channel, Raymond Benson Piano, is on YouTube, so you can see all my videos there too.
Oh, well, very cool, very cool.
Yeah.
I'll have to put some links to all that in the description. So, what you've got your book coming out in September. And you've got all these different things going on. What would you be the final thing if people could only come check out one thing? What would you tell them to go look at after this video?
Well, you know, Lee Child, who's we both know it from Thriller Fest and everything. He always says, always promote your most recent book. It's when somebody asks you that question, always say buy the new book, because that's the one you really want people to get at the moment. So I would say, you know, right now, Blues in the Dark is the most recent book. It's still available there on Amazon. It's a great sort of noir mystery that takes place both in the 1940s and in the present day, and it's very Hollywood and movie history oriented. And it deals with racism and sexism. So, and
two very, very timely topics for sure.
Yeah. And then my ghost story comes out in September. So if you like ghost stories, check that one out. And that'll be, that'll be a nice, inexpensive ebook from Crossroads. So, um, yeah, those
Yeah.
are the two right now.
So what do you think, we've talked a lot about cinema and, you're a movie historian and all this. What do you think is going to be the impact of COVID-19 on the film industry? What do you think we're going to see different after this?
I think people have their head in the sand. I'm afraid even movie theater chains are not thinking right about it. I think it's all going to change because this virus isn't going away. No matter how much they
Yeah.
say, "Oh, we're going to reopen and have people sit," and how are they going to make money with a third of the house fill? And who's going to be comfortable? Who wants to go to see a movie in a theater with a mask on and sit there with a mask? And I'm sure there's a lot of people that aren't bothered by it and they're just going to go but when you're my age, I'm very, very careful. My wife and I, we're in a risk category. We're not going to go anywhere. We're not going to go to a movie theater or any kind of thing like that until we know that there's either a vaccine or something.
Yeah.
So until it's safe, because I actually know 3 people who have died. I know several people who had very rough times in the hospital, really rough times.
Yeah.
And I know people who had it but stayed home and didn't have to go to the hospital. But even at the end they recovered. Even at the end, they said, "I don't wish this on anybody. This was horrible."
Yeah.
So I don't want it. I don't want to spread it. I don't. There's people out there saying, "Oh, I'll take the risk." Yeah, you don't want this. You don't want this virus.
Yeah. It's not the common cold. It's not
No,
the flu.
no,
That's
no.
a lot of people.
So I am concerned. My son is a professional musician, and his income was mostly gig oriented, and he's not able to work. I had a lot of speaking engagements. We don't have that anymore. When are we going to have safe ways to gather again? Even writing conferences like Thriller Fest. When are we going to feel good about doing that again?
Yeah.
Don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Well, and that's a big question that we all kind of have to face is even after we find a vaccine or a cure or medicine or whatever the case may be, even after that comes, is the world going to be changed? Are we going to be more conscious of these things?
Yeah. Well, I think there will be some definite changes in the movie. Like you specifically asked about the movie industry. I think the whole theater thing will be changed, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Because I like going to a movie theater and watching it with an audience as much as anybody. But I think that's going to change. I mean, look at there's supposed to be a new Bond movie this year. It was supposed to come out in April.
Yeah.
They pushed it to November. Are we really going to see it in November? I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to go.
Yeah. Well, it's still kind of up in the air.
Yeah.
I know even Mulan, I think, is supposed
Yeah.
to be still scheduled for the end of July, and people are
Yeah.
kind of going, are these really going to happen? The
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan movie I know is supposed to be coming in July. So there are movies that are still scheduled, but even those you kind of go, are those really going to happen? We're going to see
Yeah.
another wave, and even if they release,
Yeah.
how many people are going to go? It's really, it's been interesting seeing the straight to video, this whole like $20 rental thing coming in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, it's a little high. $20 is a little high, I think. Because especially if you're.
But if you're going, if it replaces your movie experience, is kind of what you're looking at. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so if my wife and I watch it, and we're going to spend $10 a piece at the movie theater. So if it's an
I get the senior discount.
Yeah. Well,
I don't get the senior discount when you stream it.
Yeah, this is true. But yeah, we actually just we've done several of the ones where I actually like the ones where you do it where you do 19.99 and then you just own it, like where it's like a buy.
Yeah.
Which then you can watch it later. But even the rental ones, we've done several of those, and I think it'll be interesting if a lot of these other movies like that. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to see like a Bond film go straight to video.
No, it was too expensive. I mean, they've got to recoup their money with ticket sales. So I don't know what's going to happen. I just don't know. I cannot predict in my crystal ball. It's cloudy. Very, that little 8-ball thing that says too cloudy right now or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. I know I just read that some are going back to production. But it's going to be even weird seeing like where we're going to have gaps. We've got a whole bunch of movies that are going to be stacked up. Once we actually do get back to some normalcy, we're going to have a whole bunch of movies stacked up trying to find a space. And then I think we're going to have like a big gap where there's nothing. And yeah, it's really going to be a weird kind of period. It's amazing how much this virus has affected everything.
Well, especially the entertainment industry, and not just movies, but music and even books. I know publishers that are laying off people, and it's bookstores are affected. I think it's going to be a different world when all this is over.
Yeah, I think.
Unfortunately, sadly, yeah.
Yeah, but I think But
enough about me.
I think
we got sidetracked into that discussion, but yeah.
I think a lot of people are finding a lot of creative ways to put out content, and that your son like that. I think that's a perfect example of how you can do your Dan and Raymond's movie night now online. I've been utilizing Zoom a lot during this. And Zoom came out of nowhere with this pandemic and really has become a go-to thing for so much. But yeah, it's, as we were talking earlier, it's amazing how what this would have been like. Our kids complain about it, and we kind of go, like, imagine if this would have happened when we were kids, when you didn't have the internet, when you didn't have all this stuff, and now you can't go outside and see your friends. It would have just been so much. And now I think the nice thing, if we can say that there's been a nice thing about the whole pandemic, has been that we can keep connected, and that through the internet we're still able to connect, and that well, my wife and I are now having virtual dinners with friends, with across the table, and with our son and his wife, and we thought, how come we didn't think of doing this before, but it's been pretty great, and after a minute you forget that they're on a computer screen. You really think they're right there with you, having dinner with you. So it's a nice thing to do. Well, and it's great that technology has caught up to the point where we can do that. Yeah, we're living in the future. Yeah, it's Star Trek. Yeah. All right. Well, it has been really great talking to you, Raymond. And well, thanks for having me here. Up with you. Yeah. And we will definitely have to, as I mentioned to you, we do another segment of the cross-examination where we're just kind of talking about movies and wrap up things like that. So we're going to have you That's a lot more interesting than my life. Well, I don't know. It's been pretty. I think just what you've told us here today, and I would imagine that the James Bond stories in all your travels, we could probably do a whole episode about that. But yeah, well, you can see over my shoulder some signed pictures and stuff, from Bond. Yeah, that's so cool. All right. Well, it's been great having you, and we will talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks for having me on. Be good. Be safe.